order in these places. And I try to limit for my conferences to 3 issues, and only 3 issues, because otherwise it becomes overwhelming. That's my strategy. That's my strategy.
All right, I'm just curious, when you focus on grammar in that instance, do you still correct the paper, or do you just come up with those 3 ideas and discuss that with them?
I note it on the paper,
okay,
and then discuss it.
Okay.
But I don't correct every single one.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. See, look where we are right now. We are talking about grammar correction. We are not talking about the process. But, Lance.
So it's interesting that you say this, because one of the themes that does come through the little L2 research on writing is that, and you see the parallels in first language writing, is students tend not to pay attention to any more than about 3 to 5 marginal comments.
Anyway, that's right.
So even if you are spending enormous amounts of time giving, not necessarily corrections, but hints as to what they should be focusing on, there seem to be some basic thresholds for student attention and dedication. But my question is this, and I don't mean to muddy the waters, but I think it's directly related to your issue of interpretation. What about the issue of audience? What about this sort of Bakhtinian audience, the theoretical audience? Now, of course, the students are writing for the instructor, but you have them writing in a second language. They can communicate their ideas just as well to someone who speaks their native language in their native language. So ultimately, our purpose here is to get our students thinking and writing in such a way that they would be communicating their ideas to a native speaker.
That's right.
And that necessarily implicates taking some assumptions. That is, assuming that all of the cultural references that are imbued in that piece of writing from their Anglophone perspective aren't going to translate, and then vice versa. They need to be sensitive to some of the cultural trends in the second language. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something?
Well, I think what that speaks to is to get away from surface level correction, actually. That then whether they've got, sorry to use German again, but whether or not they use a der, dem, dir, das correctly, actually does not inhibit a native speaker from understanding. And of course, that's what the natural approach in language teaching is all based upon. But I don't. You know what? That's not good enough for us in our classrooms, because we are going towards accuracy. So we have to find for ourselves, as individual instructors and as a department, because they may leave my class and go on to Hannah-Laura's class and have a different set of criteria. But that's where that balance is mastery versus communication. Yeah.
Since we're talking about lower level of instruction in the German course 101, 102, let's say, how many compositions per semester do you require?
Well, I think, Hannah-Laura, you can help me. I do 1 per chapter, is what we tend to do. And we do a chapter every...
8 chapters, or 7 or 8?
Yep, so every other week. Every other week.
Every other week, okay.
Yep.
So 7 or 8 compositions.
Yeah, but it is always very closely tied to the writing selection that will be on the exam.
I see.
The topic is almost the same.
Well, and the vocabulary that they're asked to use, and phrases, it's all belongs together in the chapter. So it's a different experience, I think, from what we're talking.
For those 7 or 8, you have about the process of 2, 3.
Well, I have to admit, in the 101, I'm down to 3.
Okay. Which is still a lot.
Yeah. Well, because to be honest, it isn't so much about new ideas. I think. I don't know. It's more about getting a handle on the idea or the topic that we in the textbook have decided are important. So that step doesn't really exist. Yeah. And there's a revision editing all at once, I would say. Yeah. And then we're over.
Yeah. Sorry. It's also related to the very practical issues about the methods for kind of giving writing for different proficient levels. Because from the lecture mainly focuses on kind of you present as a very with a very kind of a modern kind of teaching philosophy and approach in terms of writing of the kind of dynamic process based and collaborative based.
Right.
I'm very curious how do you use this kind of this very new, very and very good the philosophy. How do you use kind of this approach, apply this approach into different proficiency levels, from the very basic to very advanced levels?
Well, I think Virginie was asking sort of that same question. I think in the very beginning, you can reduce this to maybe 3 steps. And then all the way to the way we do it in the native language of the USEM, they actually do 1 paper spread over the whole semester. But I do this in 3,000, 4,000 level. I start in 202 actually with the full 5 steps in 4th semester. Now again, it's language to language, but that's because we're writing longer in our 202 already.
Do you have any documents to demonstrate that for different levels you have different methods in terms of, for example?
No, I don't. And Lance, you may know better than I, but in L2 writing instruction, there is not that much out there. And I don't know. Do you know of a study? I did not find one.
I don't think there's a preponderance of evidence one way or the other at this point for a second. Particularly not in the foreign language. In ESL, yes.
Yeah, exactly. In ESL, and who knows? You might be able to adapt what is going on in ESL to the foreign language classroom.
I'm asking this question because I have this concern that when I noticed that the kind of the one method that you use, example, to compose writing, is that you kind of through a task, give an idea, kind of for me it's task-based or content-based, and then have kind of outline it. But my kind of, I have this kind of maybe frustrated feeling is that there is always a gap between the content, no matter the content of the student writing, and both the content and the language forms they use. The kind of, for example, the content, take a geography example, that takes, say something very basic level, maybe first and second year, talk about geography. But one, the content, they did not write enough content is the first thing. Second, even if they write some content, the language form they use does not kind of match up the content they use. So I'm kind of thinking if you use this kind of collaborative or kind of this process during the whole process for writing, how teachers provide different feedbacks or kind of for different proficiency levels, different levels to improve the students' acquisition of the writing.
Lance, you have your hand up. Do you want to take that on?
You're addressing the issue of content, and not to, I don't want to skirt your question, but I'm just wondering what people think about Anita's rubric here, because you'll notice that content is what is worth the most amount of points here.
Right.
And so it sort of begs the question, I mean, it goes back to your initial sort of framing of all of this, which is we focus on sort of accuracy and sort of grammar and word choice and the like, so that we can get students ready for upper division coursework. And then oftentimes there's this disappointment or disillusionment that they aren't. But if content is our focus, then that necessarily follows. So if we are interested in getting students to understand the content, that, you're bringing up issues of content-based instruction. Well, that's certainly not what we're doing. We have language skills instruction as our focus, certainly in typical 101 through 202 coursework. And then it gets much less clear. And this is where I think some of the disconnect occurs, because there isn't really an awareness of, well, what is our ultimate goal here? Do we want students to be able to understand ideas, so through the comprehension process, through reading, understand these ideas in the L2, and then interpret them through the lens of this second language writing exercise? Or do we want them simply to have mastery of those skill sets? And I think that's largely the result, and I'd be curious to hear people's thoughts.
I was going to add, I think, at least, and I'm thinking about Romance languages, where that's a very good question. We had to come back and talk about it within our programs. We had to talk about the importance we place on grammar content within our program for continuity, thinking of the student on that continuum to continue. I think it's a good, important discussion, but may be most germane within your program to look at learning goals and, what is the description, what is the purpose of this course, so when the student does continue, I think as Denise said, on to that next